So I was reading something the other day about adverse childhood experiences, which is the term we use to describe the things that can happen to a person in childhood, such as various forms of abuse and neglect, including physical, sexual, or emotional abuse, exposure to substance misuse by witnessing adults in the household doing that, exposure to mental illness in others in the home, suicidal behaviors by others in the home, or suicidal ideation by caregivers, exposure to domestic violence, incarceration of family members, particularly their caregivers, as well as other things that might be happening outside of the home, including things like bullying, community violence, the aftermath of natural disasters, refugee experiences, war, just adversity in all of its forms. Now, generally and statistically, these adverse childhood experiences are associated with a variety of poor outcomes for the child who experienced them going into adulthood. And these can include chronic health problems, mental health issues, a greater likelihood of unhealthy behaviors such as smoking or drug or alcohol use, and even social outcomes such as having problems with steady employment or issues doing well in school, right? So I was reading a transcript of a conversation between doctors Bruce Perry and Gabor Mate about adverse childhood experiences. This was part of my preparation. I'm about to give a big lecture on narcissistic parents and adverse childhood experiences, so I'm studying everything I can get my hands on, right? And there was an interesting observation they made in their interview. Simply saying, just the simple statement that adverse childhood experiences are bad and that's that, Dr. Perry pointed out that it's actually a little bit more complicated than that. That what happens to us in adulthood is actually very multi-determined. And from a probability standpoint, certainly adverse childhood experiences are not good. And we absolutely must protect children in these circumstances, or ideally prevent the adverse childhood experience from happening in the first place. But it's not a fatalistic determination. It's not a guarantee that everything's going to go badly for that child as an adult. He pointed out that social connectedness is protective, and that in people who had better outcomes after experiencing adverse childhood experiences, the social connectedness is what protected them. So following this line of reasoning, one thing I found as I prepared for this lecture, clearly from the literature, narcissistic parenting is associated with a higher risk for adverse childhood experiences, including emotional abuse, physical abuse, emotional neglect, a general lack of attunement and awareness of their own children, a role reversal with children being expected to anticipate their parents' needs and to care for and attune to the parent, right? So let's get back to that social connectedness part, because I come back to this time and time again when I talk about healing from narcissistic relationships, that it's our strongest tool for becoming more gaslight resistant, narcissism resistant, to manage the grief after narcissistic abuse, and most importantly, to heal and grow into our authentic selves. The social connectedness piece is essential to healing, and it connects to what they were talking about. The fact that the social connectedness matters so much is good to know, but can also feel quite disheartening for survivors who may have become so isolated in these relationships or family systems that they don't have these people, the socially connected people in their lives, and don't know how to start finding these people. Listen, there's lots of places to begin. Even one friendship is a place to start. Start giving that one friendship the care and nurturance that would allow it to benefit both of you, and start growing that relationship more and sharing and listening to them. If you have connections to healthy colleagues, build out those relationships more. Even if your conversations are just about work, at least if they see you clearly, that makes a difference. Take a class. Explore offerings in your community. Seeking out mental health care can also be a place to work on this, and also start having the experience of a healthy, validating experience or relationship with someone where you are seen and attuned to. Group therapy can also be a great place to not just get mental health support, but also connect with other people who are going through something similar to you. and support groups, and those are often far more affordable or even free. And while virtual communities may not always feel as fulfilling as relationships in real life, they're an important place to start. And I see the power of support in online forums of people who are good, compassionate, reasonable, self-aware, and simply kind. As long as they're well moderated, that can happen. Narcissistic relationships, by definition, are isolating. Either the narcissistic person literally isolates you, or they are so critical of people that you know that you don't bring people around, or they are judgmental of how your time is spent. So you may stop doing that, or you are ashamed of your relationship, so you don't connect to people, or your sense of self-worth erodes in a way that you don't feel confident meeting new people, or it's all of the above. It's not easy, and starting small is essential because the support matters. For years, you have been looking into the equivalent of a funhouse mirror that distorted how you are seen and reflected back. Simply spending an hour with someone who listens, who reflects back, who sees your goodness, who tracks the conversation, all of it, it can feel like a rebirth. And as Dr. Perry suggests, it becomes a place to remain resilient against any number of childhood wounds. Narcissistic relationships and the harms that they cause proliferate in the dark, where we have no validating voices or supports. It is one of the single most powerful healing tools. And while it is hard to get there, you start with one good person and you go from there. You don't need lots. This isn't about having a brigade of 25 folks around you. Even 1, 2, 3 people, relationships where it's a give and take, a back and forth. You simply feel taller and stronger after spending time in healthy relationships. And it becomes a self-sustaining system. These relationships, these healthy relationships where you're seen and felt, are the equivalent of turning on the lights. In the film Gaslight, the old school original film, the thing that set her free, the woman being gaslighted, was that one person showed her what was going on. Sometimes it just takes one. We waste so much time knocking ourselves out to be what the narcissistic person wants, and we get so little back. Being present in healthy relationships actually gives you more energy and creates fertile ground for more healing. Always sharing the evidence when it comes up. Our pasts are not our destinies, and that there are wells we can draw upon to strengthen ourselves and stay strong in the face of what has happened to us. I was so glad I stumbled onto their conversation because it highlights what we know happens for people in narcissistic relationships. You can't do this alone, and I promise you that someday you will be this to someone else. In so many cases, you already are. I know this is the hardest part of healing, is finding those people, but you will. Remembering that by definition, narcissistic relationships leave us isolated can sort of help us remember why they can have such negative effects. But to understand that that social connectedness may be what stops this from kind of hurtling out of control and getting more and more severe in terms of the impact on you is such an important thing to know. So I hope that's helpful, and thanks again.